I think it's just automatically stigmatized. I think that they have an idea in their head of what it's supposed to look like. They always want to associate it with somebody being kidnapped and forced. And that's not always the case. My case is totally different. I was involved in human trafficking, but it started with a choice, right? I made the choice to go into that situation. I put myself in an environment that could possibly happen, and then it did. I was a product of my environment. It comes with the territory, and people don't realize that it can happen at any given place. Hey, you can get somebody that you meet online, and they're putting your fingernails and dyeing your hair, and all the while they're about to use that and then just flip it on you, and now you're involved in human trafficking. If you don't do what I need you to do, we're going to do this to your family, or I got your address, or they just capture you at your most vulnerable moment. So I don't think that people view it the way it should be viewed. I think that, like I said, they have just the idea in their head, something they've seen on TV or they read in the paper, but there's so much more that's involved. It's so deep, it's so dark, and it can happen to almost anybody. That's why I'm really, really big about advocating that for and having my story shared. I grew up in a middle-class family with 4 siblings. And so as I was growing up, there was alcoholism and there was domestic violence in the home. I became somebody that I wasn't intending to be. I had to become the mediator, the referee, the rescuer, secretary, other wife, the protector of my 4 siblings growing up in the home. And I just found myself trying to find my own identity. I was lost at a very early age. My dad was a womanizer, and he cheated, and they would have drinks and they would come home fighting, and I would find myself trying to keep the girls safe and out of the way. And all I wanted to do was just find a way out of that house as soon as possible, by any means necessary, at a very early age. So my means to escape was I started smoking marijuana at the age of 9 years old. I'm a 70s baby, so by the time I was growing up, it was nothing. Marijuana was almost everywhere. Concerts, parks. They would smoke in the bleachers. They would smoke behind the schools. So it was very, very common to come across it. And of course, I wanted to be grown. I was just ready to try to get out of that house. Me and my mother never had a really good relationship. As I was born, I had a sister who's a year and a day different from me. So when I was turning 1, she was born, so we never had that opportunity to bond. So I felt like I was alone through the whole duration of my life, if you want me to be honest with you. And then, like I said, we started having these issues going on inside of the house, and I was placed in positions that weren't my positions. She would confide in me like I was a best friend, and not knowing I was taking on her stress. And then my dad would want me to go tell her because they weren't speaking, and he ran a roofing company. And so when they weren't talking, I would have to be the secretary and write the checks and, keep log of who got paid. And it was just a lot for a little girl to handle. And like I said, I was introduced to marijuana, and of course I was looking for an escape. So that's what started my journey in addiction. Back then, you only had to be 18 years old to purchase alcohol, so I wanted to connect with that crowd. I wanted to get closer to them because I was just looking to be accepted by any means necessary, any way, shape, or form. So we started hanging out, and I was able to smoke marijuana, and I was able to drink and hold my own, and so I was accepted by the older guys and the crew and the girls, and they had cars, and I just wanted to fit in, and I did everything that I could to do that. By the age of 13. And again, like I said, they were older than me. I was a young girl just trying to get in, and all they asked was not for me not to make a fool out of myself. So it only encouraged me to handle my own and hold my alcohol and smoke without passing out. And so it was increasing without me even realizing it. And so when I would get home, I never knew what to expect, if it was going to be a day of chaos or we were just going to be an okay family. And so just that fear and that anxiety of having to go home, and deal with what was going on in the home, it was just always stressful for me growing up. I, again, I wanted to just hang out. And so I started hanging out with my friends. And 13 years old, they showed me what cocaine was. So I started very, very young and early. And so skipping school and staying out at all hours, I just became defiant. I was just a wild child, wanted to do anything, make my own rules. The house was in chaos, so why not add more to it? And who was going to notice anyway? She had four other kids, three other kids, four with me, but three other kids to tend to. And I just wanted them to have their own responsibility. So I felt like the more disconnected I become, the easier it was going to be for me to get away with what I was doing. So moving forward, 16 years old, I started dating somebody who was 20, and I thought that I was the thing to do. And I was excited. And again, this was going to get me out of the house, and I'm going to be grown, and I'm going to live this life, and it's going to be so much better than what it's been. And wound up getting pregnant, and I left to live with him. And before you knew it, I was involved in domestic violence. And because I grew up in domestic violence, I thought that all of that was okay. I come from a Hispanic culture that teaches you that when you marry a man, no matter what that man puts you through, you're supposed to remain with that person. So me being the genius that I was, the only time he did not hit me was when I was pregnant. So here I'm making baby after baby after baby. I had three babies by the time I was 20 years old. So a kid trying to raise kids. Then he introduced me to crack cocaine. Back then they called it freebase. And I didn't want to go tell my parents what was happening at the house because I was too ashamed, because this was a choice I made, trying to leave that house. So I didn't feel like I had anybody to turn to. And so I was just taking the beatings as they came. Same process. It's like whatever you've gone through, you gravitate towards. Same thing. He was cheating on me and he was beating me up. So everything that I was running from, I found myself back into. Again, the cocaine, the crack cocaine habit, it just took me. I was just, oh, I found God, is how I felt. This is heaven on earth. And so I was just going 90 to nothing doing this stuff, and I was losing the weight and I was looking horrible. And finally, my family started to see me turn for the worse, and they did an intervention and they were like, you need to get some help. My mother came to pick up my babies, and so she had them. And she started to help me raise them. And I was fine with that because I didn't even know how to raise them. And I was so caught up in my addiction, all I wanted to do was that. So we were going back and forth. I didn't need no help. And back then, we didn't really know what recovery was or what inpatient treatment. We didn't talk about those things. Um, there was no such thing as a counselor. If you went to the counselor, it was only to see how you could get your classes changed. So none of these topics were, mainstream issues. Mental health, substance abuse, none of that was brought up. It was just home ec, teach you how to sew and bake a cake. Those weren't the needs that I needed. Um, I met some friends, and they had a motel room, and they invited me over. And so I started frequenting the hotel, and I thought it was a cool thing because everybody was getting high. Everybody was doing the same thing. So I easily connected to a group of people who were running from something, and all they wanted to do was get high or die trying. And we created a family. And I didn't know what was going outside of those doors of that motel room. And so a friend of mine, he said he would be out, he'd be back, and he was going to go make some money, and he was going to bring in some more dope. And we're there, we're waiting, and he didn't return. He got arrested. I walked to my car to get some clothes, and there was a gentleman who saw me. And because I was young and I had long black hair and I had a car and my clothes were fairly decent and, I still had a little job, I was noticed right away. So I was invited down to his room, and he had other people in there. He was a dope dealer. And he took me in, and he made me feel comfortable. Food, shelter, a place to stay. I was accepted, and it was just like all the free drugs I could possibly get, not knowing what was coming after that. I stayed there with him probably about 3 weeks. Everybody, the girls that were coming in and out to buy, or, they were turning tricks in the back room. I guess that's what it was then. I didn't know that was happening. I just seen him go in and close the door. But I was kind of recognizing what was going on, but I never thought that that would be me. So after I was all nice and, addicted and needed more and didn't have anything to offer, they had already taken the car. It was just a horrible situation. That's when the tables turned. You need to get up and go get me my money. And I'm like, what money? So you think you've been sitting here smoking drugs and having drugs at your discretion and all that was supposed to be free? And that's when I realized I was in a situation that I wasn't going to be able to get out of. And so with that being said, I was put out in the streets and I was told that I had to start selling my body in order to pay back the debt that I owed. So with that, I started hanging around with the girls that were out there so they could kind of take me up under their wing and show me how this was done. And it just became a vicious cycle before you knew it. I mean, it was just cold and ugly and vicious, and everything that I was doing, I hated myself more and more and more. I was so ashamed. All the days that I cried about not wanting to be in my house, I would give anything to go back, but I just didn't know how. I was so wrapped up in my addiction that I felt like this was going to be it, and this is what I chose, and, full of pride and huge ego. I was never going to come back to say I was sorry. That just wasn't going to happen because I created this. Just an ongoing cycle of abuse, rape. I was taken in by a gentleman, and I thought that this was going to just be something that was going to, just have a profitable return. And before you knew it, he put a gun to my head and, made me do the things that I didn't never expect that I would have to do forcefully. And so all this, just these ugly demons were attaching themselves, and everywhere I went, it was just becoming colder and darker and deeper and deeper and deeper. I was diving in, and I just didn't even know how to get out anymore. And so I just accepted the fact that that's where I was at, and this is what it was going to be. So how do you survive? You start engaging and you start affiliating yourself and you start connecting, like a connection that you can't even describe, a connection with the people. You make them your family. You get so close and bonded with them that they're like almost your everything. And because I had a family and I had kids, I needed to fill that void. And so I created these relationships with these people who were really no good for me. I started beginning to get arrested for prostitution. And I didn't know how to call my family and tell them that because, of course, I wasn't brought up that way. That's not what I was supposed to be doing. And somehow or another, this is where I'm at today. So one arrest turned to another arrest. And, I'm moving from neighborhood to neighborhood. And then as I'm going forward and doing these things, I just hated everybody that crossed my path. I hated them so bad, and I wanted to hurt anybody that got in my way by any means necessary. I didn't care who you were or what you were doing or how it was going to make you feel or what loss you were going to take, but I was going to hurt you if you crossed my path. Hurt you because I was hurting. And so I was stealing and credit cards and green cards and anything to make $1. And if you would say, hey, you took my wallet, well, you have to buy that back. Even though I had just gotten your money for a sexual act, there was just so much that started to happen. And I was out there for a period of 10 years. It got to the point where if a newcomer came and they were fresh and vulnerable and impressionable and lost, I recognized it immediately because that's who I used to be. And so I became a predator. I preyed on these individuals, and I became the human trafficker. I would get these girls and invite them into my room, and because I was so settled and so established out there, I had a room, I had clothes, I had hygienes, so I would invite them in as this nurturing person that was going to care for them, not knowing that I was going to send them out to do the dates that I didn't want to do anymore. I was tired. And of course, I didn't want to go to jail. My sixth arrest, I was going to TDC. There wasn't no playing about it anymore, and I hadn't seen that side yet. And I was so involved in my addiction that I didn't want to give that up either. I was out there 10 years or more, and then I was finally arrested on my sixth prostitution case. And then in there, when I was arrested, I just got down on my knees and I just begged and I begged and I cried and I thought to myself, what can I do to get out of this? Because I just want to go home. I miss my kids. I'm going to cry now. I just wanted to go home. And I didn't know how to come back and ask for forgiveness because I didn't raise my children. They looked at me as just a stranger because I had no involvement in their life. And so my mother became their mother, this horrible person that I invented in my head that probably wasn't as horrible as I made her out to be. Because she was just growing up like I was growing up, and we were all trying to do the best that we could with what we had. And so she wound up being their mother. And so when I was arrested, I just asked God to, just find me a way to get home, and I would do whatever it takes to do so. And it was strange enough that now Harris County Jail offered a reentry program, and it was called We've Been There, Done That. It was pretty new. It'd been around probably about a year or so. And I had the director of services come to me. Her name is Catherine Griffin, and she just walked into my cell, and I looked so tired, so busted up. I'm 43 years old. Now, mind you, I started this little venture when I was about 30. I'm 43 now. And she just asked me simply, are you tired? And I was tired, and I had to be honest with her. And she connected with me in a way that I can't even begin to imagine. I knew she was God sent. Because everything that she was telling me was the same thing my mom was telling me, had been telling me. I just didn't want to receive it from my mother. But it was my message all along. And I used to ask God, why me and how come? And, you just don't wake up one day saying, hey, I want to be a prostitute today. That's not how this starts. It starts with something as simple as, just winding up with the wrong crowd and doing the wrong things and, having the wrong idea of what home's supposed to look like. I grew up in the age where you look at TV and you see Leave It to Beaver. Everybody's supposed to sit at the table and the dog's supposed to eat the scraps off the floor. And, dad is supposed to be available at any given time and your siblings are supposed to be all nice and neat. And none of that was my truth. That wasn't happening in my house. So if it didn't match what was happening on the TV, then already it was wrong. It was not the right living space for me. So I just had to come clean and decide to make some changes. And, you know, she asked me if I was ready to get out of the game, and she would go to court for me, and I would stay inside of her reentry program. And I just needed to keep my mouth shut and my ears open because I was so in a place where I had to answer for everything because I was so manipulative, and everything that I did was for gain, selfish gain. And she recognized that from me from the beginning, and she's like, you just need to keep your mouth shut and your ears open. If you're going to work this program, I just need you to sit back and listen to what's being said. It's not about excuses. It's not about your situation looks different from their situation, or we're not the same. We're all the same. And I had to absorb that. And I finally had to sit there and just say, okay, you're right. And I did it. And so in doing so, I decided that, oh my God, I was on fire. I just wanted to give everybody back what I had learned. And so I was really excited about it. So, I've told her that I was going to do this when I got out, and this is what it was going to look like. And of course, she's heard that story from a lot of people. She's been doing this for quite some time. And so, of course, she was not going to tell me it wasn't going to happen. But I felt like there was a need for me to make it happen. So as soon as I got out, all I wanted to do was go back to the same neighborhoods that I exhibited that behavior, the same bus stops that I was prostituting from in front of all these little kids, and go give back the information that I found. And I did. And I tried to figure out, how can I do this and be successful at doing it? So I invented things in my head to say, okay, when I was out there, what were the needs that I needed? What did I wish somebody would come do for me? And simply a hot meal, some hygiene, just a hug, some recognition. Those were the things that I missed so dearly when I was out there because, like I said, it's a very lonely, miserable, cold, demonic place when you're in them streets. And everybody else carries the same spirits around you, so we connected well. So I started going back to the neighborhoods and I was doing these little fairs and letting them know about the transitional living facility that I found out about and how recovery is possible. And Miss Kathy Griffin, she's got a reentry program. If you don't get to know her now, you're going to get arrested and you're probably going to get to know her later. So I'm trying to get you to know her now. So I would take hygienes, hot dogs, and I started doing it on the days that were very lonely for me, Mother's Day and Thanksgiving, Valentine's Day, just kind of wanted to send a message of love. I did it so much that I was recognized on Fox 26. So it became that I was this person and I was doing these things and I was impacting the community and some of the people that I was involved in while I was doing my prostitution and my addiction, they were coming to group. And so I was starting this little thing and I was loving it. And I wanted everybody to have it. I got a call. I got a call from Harris County Drug Court, and they asked me if I was interested in a position, just going in there, sorting out papers, faxing and filing. And I'm thinking, drug court? Me? Like, are you serious? And so I went. I had a recovery coach go with me. I had Miss Amelia Murphy, who's the director of Santa Maria at that time. And they believed in me so much that they went and sat on the interview and encouraged these people to give me that position. So I held that position for 5 years. And it was just amazing because I went from standing in front of the judge to now sitting alongside her. And I was doing so much inside of that program. I was able to coordinate and I was able to bring the recovery coach inside of the court system and let them know that there was so much support, but we were not utilizing it. And how do you show these attorneys that addiction and prostitution, it's not 9 to 5. It's an ongoing situation. And how do we address these issues? You're just asking these questions. You might want to ask these questions because if you spot it, you pretty much got it. And so I was encouraging the coordinator and the program director, like, no, there's some prostitution going on or something's happening in the home because I had already had those experiences. So I identified with all that pain and guilt and fear and tears that these women were coming in broken and exhibiting. And it dawned on me. It just hit me like a ton of bricks because I remember asking God, why me? Why? And it was clear as day because I need you to do this right here. If I didn't take you through all of that, you wouldn't be able to do the work that you're doing today. And you would not be able to connect with these people in a way that they would understand and you would understand them. And I knew it. This is what I was supposed to be doing. And so I've been doing that for the past 10 years. I moved from working in the drug court. Now I work with an agency who has parents that are involved in the child welfare system. And again, I can relate with that because I know what it was not to be with my children for a long period of time. And so I try to encourage them to, work the family plan of service and how to understand it. And these services that are being offered, they're really remarkable services. And sometimes, in the positions that we're in, we probably wouldn't be able to afford them. And yeah, it sounds bad that DFPS is in the picture, but ultimately, they're not really as bad as you would think. We have to hold ourselves accountable for why they came into the picture. They created a position for me. It's titled parent partner. I come with a lived experience and I go into court and I advocate for these individuals who have these issues, underlying issues, prostitution, addiction, intellectual disability, mental health, and I advocate for them in the courtroom to help them reunify with their families. I'm the only parent partner in the entire state of Texas, and I've held that position for 3 years. I'm now studying to be an LCDC. I'll graduate in December. I'm a mental health peer specialist. I'm a recovery coach, and I'm a certified prevention specialist today. I was complaining about all these hats that I wore as a child, and somehow or another, I found another set of hats that I wear daily. But to see the outcome and to see people, reunified with their families and, remove themselves from ugly and dark situations, I mean, it's very rewarding for me. And to be able to have a hand in that gives me a lot of pride. And when I sleep, I had a guy friend ask me, like, how do you go to sleep and just fall to sleep? And I'm like, because I didn't screw nobody over today. I worked honest program. I worked with them and I genuinely gave out what was given to me freely. So I just go to sleep. I don't have all that guiltiness and all these things running around in my head. Who did I screw over? Who's going to get me for taking their wallet yesterday? I don't live that life anymore.